practices and transpose their courses from being face-to-face or whatever their spring version of their course was to a hybrid or an online. But I think our students struggled with, they bounced back and forth on the hybrid versus online because their students wouldn't show up for the hybrid face-to-face, or their students left campus. And so they were prepared to have some of those face-to-face meetings and then would only have a couple students show up.
We had that quite often also. Lynn.
Hi, good afternoon, everybody. So I'll answer the question, but just to give a little context. So here at Pitt, we do a new graduate student orientation every fall, and it's a 1-week orientation, and most of the days in that orientation are dedicated to helping students teach public speaking. So they get a crash course in teaching public speaking, and there's usually about half of the students will be teaching public speaking that fall and the other half the following year. Some have taught before, some have taught public speaking before, some come from English departments into a comm department, which is where I teach. So there's a little bit of variety, a little bit of range, but there's always some experience in the mix, which I find quite helpful. This year we had 4 new graduate students. 2 of them were teaching in the fall, and they had both taught before. One had taught public speaking a number of times. So that was pretty useful. And instead of the fall semester seminar called Teaching Practicum, which they would usually take all of the new students, whether they're teaching or not, they'd usually take with me, we asked the 2 students who are teaching to take the university-wide faculty development course. So that was in an effort to try to recognize that the people at the Center for Teaching who teach that course were more experienced in online remote delivery than certainly I was and anybody else in my department. The jury's still out on whether that worked, because I think we're all just sort of scrambling, including folks at the Center for Teaching, but that's what we did. And so with that context in mind, one of the things that I found particularly helpful, Michelle had mentioned reaching out, and I think that was absolutely vital. I don't think anybody, I would have heard or seen from anybody had I not do that, because hardly anyone is teaching in person at Pitt. We're under a hybrid model, and most of us chose to teach online throughout the semester. So reaching out was very important. And the other thing that I did that I thought was really helpful for me as well, because I am teaching public speaking this semester, never taught online before, is that I hosted a couple meetings for public speaking instructors. And that was graduate students, the new ones, the senior ones, part-time faculty, full-time faculty like myself. You know, anyone who was teaching public speaking this semester was invited to that meeting. And we did a Zoom poll to increase the chances that people would actually be able to show up. And I think we had a really good attendance. And 2 meetings I think also helped. So we basically brought people together and said, hey, look, let's identify some challenges. Let's identify some potential solutions. You know, what's going on in your world? What have you done that works? What have you done that hadn't worked? Put folks into breakout rooms so they could get to meet each other, interact with each other, which, as Leanne mentioned, is really helpful at this time. And then produced a collaborative document that everyone in the meeting got, and everyone who wasn't able to come to the meeting got, to get a sense of how we're dealing with things, and sort of ideas that I could also implement going forward. Such as changing one of the course requirements that we have, which actually the faculty voted to do. So I found that particularly helpful for myself, and I think the folks at the meeting also did as well.
That doc idea I think is really great, and I'm going to start using that. How about we pursue this thread of connection a little bit? That's another thing that I wanted to ask everybody about. How is it that you are maintaining connections with the TAs during this time? And I know everybody's kind of got a different scenario. I meet with the whole group once a week on Zoom, and then I have a class with the first year people that meets twice a week. So it's all through Zoom. I said my goal was that I would meet them all in person before they graduated, and we're still sticking to that. But it's been a little odd. For us, I think it's worked really well. I think we've developed good relationships in spite of the screen and the presence difference. Are there things that y'all have done that have worked really well, or things that you tried that you're like, I'm never doing that again?
I can speak a little bit to that. So I'm at Iowa State, and we have about 25 instructors of public speaking, and about half of them were new graduate students this year. So I had a pretty large new cohort that I was meeting with regularly over Zoom. We did synchronous Zoom sessions. And so that was one way they take a graduate course with me, and that's why we were meeting online via Zoom. That was one way that we had a sense of connection among that new cohort. But something that worked really well for us was that I hired a few of our returning, more experienced graduate students to be peer mentors. And then they led a few theme sessions with the new cohort where I wasn't present, but they had a specific task that they were doing collectively together. So that provided them with a space to kind of get to know the other graduate students a little bit more without me directly there. Then the mentors were always really good about looping me into just the main points of what they covered, so that there was still some level of cohesion among me and then the students that I was working with. In the spring, we don't meet with that new cohort regularly. And so I'm trying to think about ways to keep up either brown bag sessions or peer mentoring sessions of some sort that would keep up that community aspect in the virtual environment, since we're teaching virtually asynchronously. But then another sort of question that I have in the back of my mind too is when this cohort transitions out of teaching fully online and back into the face-to-face setting, what kinds of additional mentorship is going to be needed? Because I felt like when I was doing the pedagogy class this fall, I had an eye towards helping them run the online courses on the ground, the logistics of that, the big picture teaching ideas, but also kind of a forward-looking eye. So we were doing on top of that kind of sample examples of having them come up with how they would run something they did online in the face-to-face context too, and modeling that for us, albeit over Zoom, since we were doing it in the socially distanced form. But that's probably not going to be enough when they step back into the classroom in the fall. So thinking about ways to keep that connection up in that context, I think will be an ongoing challenge.
That's awesome. And brown bag sounds so much better than my weekly meeting. I think I'd rather go to a brown bag than.
I'm curious, what do you talk about every week?
Oh, us?
Yeah.
We do different things every spring. It kind of depends on the needs of the class. Sometimes we do a deeper dive into a chapter. Sometimes we'll have special, in fact, a lot of times we'll have a special speaker come in. So we have this academic care team. One of our faculty moved into that administrative role. She comes in and does a session on how do we help students who are struggling and what resources are available. I have an expert on my faculty in college student mental health. And so that's good for both the grad students. And I keep reminding them, you guys are also students, grad students and undergrad students. And so they do a whole session on easy issues and tough issues that we've faced, like suicidal ideation and that kind of thing. So a lot of it is more nuts and bolts kinds of things that we don't always get to drill down on in the first semester. But it just kind of depends on what the needs are. We did a lot of sessions on online teaching this past year. And how are you doing? We did a lot of that this last year too. I don't know if that answers it.
Yeah, no, it is. I meet with my grad students once a month, and like it's like pulling teeth to get them to those meetings. So that's why I was like, I don't know if I could ever get them there once a week.
It's in their contract.
It's in our contract too.
Really?
Yes, it is.
I can. I worked in a place where I can see that could be an issue. So I feel your pain for sure.
Thank you.
I do. Anybody else doing something interesting or special with regard to getting people connected to each other? I'm going to steal some of these ideas actually, because I don't know what I'm going to do for spring either exactly.
Yeah, well, no, because the reason I ask, and it sounds like a lot of these kinds of things are kind of more care for graduate students more generally too. And some of that is picked up in our department. So there are, the department head and the director of undergraduate studies have office hours every week or every 2 weeks that are different themes, like they'll have a pajama party or silly hat party or these kinds of things. And that seems to go well. We have our social media accounts for the department. We've had our grad students take over for a week at a time. And that has been it's actually been fun and interesting at the same time for our grad students. So those are other ways to engage them. I think I'm more concerned about these students that started amongst all of this kind of, I don't know, mess is maybe a good way to put it. And how do we pull them in? Because I think that's going to be my bigger challenge. And we did all this work to take our course online in the fall, and I'm thinking to myself, does that mean I'm going to have to do the work then to reverse it all next summer? This is actually a question that I'm really thinking about, because because our course is almost exclusively taught by graduate students, we'll bring in an adjunct here or there. It is very much a course in a box. I think somebody else mentioned that too. And so, it took a lot of effort to get it onto an online format. And now I'm thinking about that online format doesn't necessarily work in a face-to-face classroom. So I'm wondering that too, I suppose.
I think that's a good thing. Anne, were you going to say something?
Oh, well, I was going to mention, Kelly. Yeah, I had thought a little bit about that too. So I know for a lot of you mentioned doing the new graduate student orientation in the summer, and we have one of those as well. And it was always a very intensive 1 week experience where we all came together and we were there together for almost the full week. But I really stripped down the training in some ways this time, and recorded and sent out some training videos further in advance for folks that wanted to get started a little bit earlier. And we really built out our course shell and our LMS on Canvas, and then sent that out to them a couple weeks in advance too. So by the time we were meeting synchronously online, they were supposed to have gone through the course, watched the videos, and set up a few things. And I'd never really sent a lot of materials like that out in advance before this year, but I'm kind of thinking I might either recycle or re-record and build on the videos that I created this year to kind of get them started a little bit earlier in the future. And that might kind of change, even when we're meeting face-to-face for orientation, what kinds of information they're already equipped with in advance. So they might be even more prepared to step into orientation that week. So I don't think it would be something, because our graduate students aren't on contract till the week of as well. So I'm careful not to assign them a lot of extra work, but I do find a lot of them are reaching out to me even earlier saying, what should I be doing now, and getting ready and things. So just giving them that security of, well, here's a few videos you could watch to kind of get up to date on what your task is. And then we can hit the ground running that week. So I'm kind of hopeful that some of the things that we built will end up being value added even to our face-to-face experience when we move back into the classroom too, but we'll see.
Yeah, as you guys are talking about going from fully online to fully face-to-face, I realize how blessed I am that I actually have a blended format where they are in class with students sometimes, and they are online sometimes. So no matter what we do, we can make a shift. I hope we get into a format and stay in it for a while. One of the things that's come up, I think, several times is this issue of graduate student mental health. And I've mentioned before, this idea that you really are students, not just people that are, as one of you said earlier, sort of the hired labor. What kinds of things did you do to help graduate students manage their mental health? Have you had students reach out to you for things that you didn't expect? Are there situations that you've had to deal with graduate students and their students, maybe?
I think I have a hard enough problem dealing with my own stuff right now. I mean, this wasn't training we had in grad school. So this is like a whole new territory. And I think I'm the coordinator for our program, not the basic course coordinator, but I was like, hold on tight. This is a learning experience that you're going to be able to learn from, in the future. And I guess if you really want to do this in the future, this is like jumping in the deep end, because this is I hear we're putting the bike together as we're learning to ride it, and a lot of this, for at least for me. And so it's just trying to be as supportive as possible. Like I send group me, anybody has anything, if you just want to come in and complain or bitch or whatever, that's fine. You know, if you want me just to be an ear to listen to. So, I mean, I don't know. I mean, students are way different than when I was a student in the 1900s. So it's I don't know. They're just more anxious, and it's just weird to deal with that. And this is my kind of caveman mentality, just kind of nod. And I've, you know, my wife has trained me to like just shut up and listen and stuff like that. So, but it's just, it's hard for me to have an answer. So I'm kind of stammering on this, is just try to be supportive in there as much as possible in a virtual sense. Cause you know, you have students that are in the danger zone on this.
I agree. When a student reaches out, that's a really good strategy. I had a student that didn't reach out and literally was melting down. And the only way I could see it was because this student missed a couple of, like, I kept looking for things, right? I kept looking that, gee, this content wasn't posted, or, you know, these due dates seem to be confused. And I think that was hard. It's like the signs of an instructor or grad student, in our case, melting down, aren't visible necessarily. And I think that many times they resist reaching out for help because it appears that they can't handle things. You know, the same reasons we all have for not reaching out for support, they have, but even more compounded because they have to reach to the people that are also kind of responsible for their academic future, right? And so I found it really to be challenging. I think I have to be better, I think, at looking for those little signs that things aren't going as well as possible. Because in this case, you know, I have the monthly meetings, and there was a missed meeting. There was content missing on Blackboard. There are a couple of things. And then one of their students reached out to me to say, hey, I've been trying to get an answer and I'm not getting responses to my emails. And that's when I was like, okay, okay, we have to have a big meeting. And so we did, but, and it very much was that mental health crisis that this person was having.
And I'm sorry to interrupt, we had a grad student who was manic, and just one day, all of a sudden, all the furniture in the hallway was, I mean, this is pre-COVID, but like was all of a sudden stacked into their student office. And the janitor was like, what's up with this? I'm like, I had no clue, because on face value, it seemed like, all right, these are the same stresses that all grads, you know, I got papers due, or, you know, and all that stuff, and whatever personal boyfriend, girlfriend issues out there. But like to this level, and then just kind of like, we had to call the police because we were like, you know, for their own protection, to find out that they just ghosted somewhere. So, I mean, that's the most extreme we've had to deal with, and that's even not even in a pandemic. So
it's one of the things I'm going to try to do. Oh, sorry, go ahead, Kelly.
No, I was going to say, I don't know that, I do agree that today's grad students are anxious. I'm not so sure they're more or less anxious than I was, you know, and I am ancient history when it comes to being a grad student. However, I think they're more aware of the stresses today than we were, or than I was at their age. And I don't know if that's good or bad, but I do think they're more aware of when they're under stress, and they are very protective of themselves. You know, they kind of focus inward at that point. And I wonder whether, you know, if we can get them to reach out, to know they're not alone a little bit more. To me, that's a key to helping them. Sorry, Leanne, I didn't want to.
Oh, no. What I was going to say actually piggies back well off of that. I think I usually sit down with all the grad students in the spring when their evaluations come back, and I do one-on-ones with each one and help them interpret the numbers and the comments, and, you know, soothe some bruised egos sometimes and that kind of thing. And I think I'm also going to use that time, or maybe do it twice, and just have a one-on-one check-in, because that's the thing I really miss a lot is, if a student stays after my class, my Zoom class, we can have a one-on-one. And so many of them have said, it's so nice basically just to talk to me without anybody else around. And so I think I'm going to be more intentional next semester about building in time for them to just have access to me in ways, and they always could ask for it, but they just, I mean, you're right, like they don't ask for it. And I'm hoping that maybe through having those conversations, I can say, how's it really going? And what can we really do to help you if anything? So that's, I mean, as you guys are talking, this is something I'm formulating in my mind right now. Any other thoughts about grad student mental health and how we help them get through that? Tracy says, our biggest challenge has been international students' engagement and mental health. I can imagine. I don't know if anybody else has had that experience. Kelly says, yeah.
Well, and one of the things we did was we actually have a once a month kind of meeting where they get on and ask some questions. And our international students have had different challenges teaching online and connecting with students, and how to, they have normal challenges in a classroom anyway, especially when we're working with speaking and writing and getting those kind of content across. But when we've moved them into an online format, that struggle is even harder. And so helping them interpret how to work with their students, what some of the, they don't have this, have the same body language cues that you had when they were in the classroom. And we've definitely seen the engagement with our international students in their classes has been really hard. And then they've had a whole different mental health struggle on not being near family resources some of our other students still had access to.
Or not being sure they can stay, and lack of stability there. Yeah, for sure.
Well, and often they have, English is very often a second language for them. So their writing skills aren't as sharp. And that really comes to the forefront in an online format, because so much communication takes place, kind of in a written format. So it is, I agree, Tracy, the international students really are challenged right now.
How many of you have international graduate assistants? Just a show of hands. Most folks. I think we've not had them as often at our university. In our department, they are around campus a lot, but lately, I'm sure everybody's the same way. Our numbers have just plummeted, and that may change in the next year or so, but it's been a real challenge to not even have a community on campus that you might have had a year before. So, yeah, Ian.
One issue that's cropped up a few in multiple conversations, actually, that I think is maybe impacting mental health of graduate student TAs is the sort of bombardment of email communication from their students too. Because I think I've heard it repeatedly from graduate students, and I've noticed this myself, that when you're online, and especially we're doing the asynchronous format, then instead of confining communication with students to class time, meeting face-to-face, or office hours, and maybe a smattering of email, graduate students feel like they have students reaching out to them 24/7. And I have struggled a little bit to manage their own time in that context. Do any of you have any good strategies or tips or pieces of wisdom you've given to your students to help work with that? Yeah.
Absolutely. I have had grad students actually come to me because of this issue, and they really struggle with it, because as a student, they want to be responded to very quickly. So they feel this additional pressure, I think, to respond to email. And while it's much easier for me to tell my class, hey, if you are emailing me after 5 o'clock, don't expect a response till tomorrow morning. They do not feel the same way because their work habits often have them doing their work later in the evening. So, but I think it's really important for them to learn how to draw boundaries. As we all know in academia, boundaries are hard to draw anyway, because many of us do work from home on evenings and weekends or, whenever. One of the advantages of academia is its flexibility, but the flip side of that is it makes it harder to draw boundaries. So I've suggested to them that they do not respond to student emails after a certain time at night, like 8 o'clock at night or whatever they're comfortable with, and just reinforcing with them that they do not need to be on call 24/7 for their students, that, it's okay to say to your students, if I get an email after a certain hour, I will respond to it in the morning. If it means that you're late on your assignment, that's on you, because that means you didn't start it before the due date, right? So it's really just, to me, I saw tremendous relief from the grad students that had approached me on this, for me to say, no, I'm backing you up on this one. This is an appropriate response. So don't feel that you have to be that way. So I think the email is just part of online education, right? We have 30 students in our public speaking class. Don't get me started. But we go from kind of this, I can say something and announce it to the class, and it gets to 25 of them, and the remaining 5 can get it from the other people, to a lot of these one-on-one correspondences. But the other thing that I suggest very strongly to them is that they develop a regimen of communication with their students to preempt these emails. So I have them send out a Monday morning email that says, here are the things that you should have on your radar for this week. Here are the due dates or whatever. And that way the students know that they develop that habit of saying, oh, wait, maybe I should check that Monday email before I email this question to the instructor. So I think a lot of the one-on-one activity, or a lot of the email activity, may also be a signal that the TAs or the GTAs, or we call them graduate instructors, are not communicating as effectively as they need to in this environment. And so working with them to develop, that regular once a week email, and then maybe a reminder email midweek, or maybe a feedback email at the end of the week. Here's some general feedback to the entire class on the things that I saw in the homework activities or whatever. That helps to take some of that pressure off.
There's some comments about what you're saying here in chat. Kimberly says, great point, Kelly. I think the GTAs need our permission to do that. And I'll tell you, I just had this conversation yesterday with my new graduate assistants, and I've had it at least 3 times already. So I'll chime in something later. Anne says, Kelly, it's a great point that GTAs may feel more pressure to respond. Kimberly says that the TAs and I actually set our out of office messages, so students will get a response and know we'll respond 24 hours during a week and 48 hours during the weekend. I think that's really great. One thing that I'll do, and I know Dave had a comment also, is I encourage putting together fax documents as you sort of get the same questions over and over again. And I taught online for, 10 or 12 years. I don't even know now. And so I have a pretty well-honed set of questions that I know students are going to ask no matter how well I explain it. And then I can just copy and paste if I need to in an email, or I can just post the document on Blackboard and refer them to that. Dave, what were you going to say?
I was going to add context to Kim's context, because we're in the same program, and the student was upset that they sent an email like on a Saturday at, like 2 or 3. And like, why didn't you get back to me? And like, what do we do? I'm like, it's the weekend. You're with your family. You're working. Maybe you're having a beer. I mean, who knows? So like, you had to like, what's something so what do we do to help the students? Because they there's that tension that they're not faculty or they're not professors, so they don't get that like whoa, kind of like the respect or fear or whatever between students and the teacher part. So that was like, well, this is the quick and easy one to it. I think too is, I don't know, does anybody has like a netiquette thing, expectations, a communication expectations in their syllabus, which sounds really simple, but that kind of helps out to an extent too, because you can reference that. And I know students love it's in the syllabus, hearing that over and over again all semester, but and just try to be there for the students when they're like, what do I do when someone's upset that I don't respond to it? It's just students want that instant gratification, just kind of how they're brought up, and they freak out if you don't respond with that day, you know, and you got to continue to tell them what's your cutoff point, what's your threshold, are you willing to answer? Because I got a group me and a student messaged me on Wednesday, and that's the first day that I've taken off in a long time, and just was like, just being lazy or doing whatever. And I'm like, hey, I'm not near a computer and I'm going off the grid. So talk to me on Monday, you know, and yeah. So I don't know if that rambling made sense.
No, it did.
No, I have colleagues that create like a water cooler thread on their discussion board and encourage other students to respond to various points and, you know, questions about upcoming assignments and how to turn things in and that kind of thing. And they reinforce every time they have student communications that check the syllabus, check the water cooler thread, and then check any kind of announcements in Blackboard before you email me. And that can also help too.
That's been helpful. I've got a group me and students will answer their own questions, so I don't have to do that as well. That's been helpful.
I don't know. Does anybody else use GroupMe? I've been thinking about using Slack, to be honest. Tara, you use it. Tracy uses it.
I found Slack to be really useful, and they'll do the same thing. They'll answer each other's questions and post resources to each other that then I don't have to do.
Awesome. I was kind of hoping it would work that way. So that
Our
maybe
students create their own GroupMes. And I, as an instructor, I don't want to be any part of it.
We've actually discouraged a lot of GroupMes across the board because there's just been too much, especially our undergraduates using it to cheat and code of conduct violations on GroupMe. Not that they can't do it on any other platform, but
still, yeah. Oh, Lauren says any risk that the wrong information is disseminated in the water cooler.
Yeah, you do want to keep an eye on it, but if it becomes more robust, the other students will jump in and chime in on incorrect information. But if it's on your discussion board, it's kind of there for you to keep a check on, which is nice, right? Whereas if it's circulating in some of these other formats and you're not on that format, I think there's a bigger risk, right? So.
Yeah, good stuff. I'm writing when I look over here, I'm typing things on my little iPad over here. So I've got a lot of good stuff on my list so far, but I need to switch over. I think I want to shift gears since we kind of, I think, talked that one through a little bit. Another thing that we've kind of already talked about some of these other things that I have on my list, but adapting to the COVID protocols and maybe high risk TAs. I'm high risk, so everything is done for me through Zoom. I wonder if any of you are dealing with maybe your school teaches in person and you have a high risk TA or something similar like that causes a conundrum. That plus, did you have to teach your graduate students some things about COVID protocols that because maybe they're young and maybe they're not paying a lot of attention that they needed to know? And how did that go? How do you think you're going to be doing that going forward? Are there things that you need to reinforce with them? Tara. Oh, no, never mind. She's waving.
I have to leave, and I was trying to say goodbye and thank y'all so much.
See your chat.
Very
Thanks, Tara. See ya.
See you.
I think so. We do have TAs that are high risk. many of our TAs, so being in Chicago, the other thing that we have is most of the accessibility to campus is through public transportation, which was a huge thing for so many people. They felt that they couldn't take public transportation to get to campus. And, you know, even our campus, the classes that did meet, which was a very, very small percentage of classes that met in person, you know, there are protocols there that the university has put in place. So I am concerned about what will happen. We already know that we are teaching online through next summer. So the first time that we would have any opportunity to be back face to face would be next fall, and there's no clarity on, you know, how that will look. Whether we'll have some classes online, some not, hybrid format, I'm not sure. You know, a lot is up in the air yet, but I would anticipate we would have to do a lot of training, because, you know, what people do in their private life is different than what they will have to do in their professional life. So
just as an example, our classrooms are small, and Lauren knows this because she's taught at Missouri State. Classrooms are pretty small, and our classes are capped at 24, and I hope to God they stay there. And so it demands, even if you have 10 people in the class, the space demands that everybody be pretty careful about where they sit so that they can remain 6 feet apart. So I had my assistant director actually create a seating chart and say, these are where the seats are in the classroom. This is where you need to have your students sit. And he measured it. We had numbers counts on every classroom, and they had to also take roll every day and also limit students to where they sat for an entire semester. Like, you pick your seat day 1 or 2, and that's your seat. Because if there's contact tracing to be done, they're reaching out to us and asking who sat near this person, how far away were they, what time of day, were they there for the whole class period? And, you know, normally we haven't really had to keep that level of detail, and it's an adjustment for everybody. So that's one thing I've had to teach them, is the 6-foot rule, and how do you make sure that students do it. One of the TAs came up with a really neat idea that I would be stealing if I were actually physically there, is he put something, I forget what it was. And COVID wise, I don't know how bright this is, but he put, I don't know if it was a copy of the syllabus or some activity they were going to do on each seat that he wanted them to sit in. And so he identified the seats ahead of time rather than trying to direct traffic as they came in. I don't know that I would want to hand them something, but maybe there's some way to identify those seats. But that's just one of many things we had to teach them. And I had a number of grad students who were really nervous about COVID coming in. And, you know, they have adjusted, I think. And I don't know if it's for the better or the worse that they're more relaxed, but they are more relaxed now. So I don't know if anybody else had to deal with, you know, what are the protocols and what do graduate students have to do differently? Like, are they in offices by themselves? Or, you know, do they wear masks in the office? Because ours don't. And there's like 10 of them in an office. Makes me nervous. I'm like, why are we doing this? But that is what they have been told by people higher up the food chain than myself. So I just didn't know if anybody else had dealt with teaching protocol. But if you're going back to face after a time online, that's probably something that you'll have to think about and deal with the nervousness and that kind of stuff.
These are a lot of things that I rely on our department and our university administration to worry about. And yet, you know, when it comes right down to it, it's going to be me that's going to be walking in the classroom and looking at those chairs and saying, no student here, a student here, no student here.
Mm-hmm. It's all they rely on us. Tracy?
Our university pulled chairs and put them in storage. We didn't have a choice.
Nice.
They went through everything. There was actually a professor in physics that created a program that we could put in the dimensions of the desks, the dimensions of the room, and it gave you the possible layouts and the total number of people that could be in that space. And so every room has a number put on it. Now, my conference rooms can have like 3 people total in them. But we were able to use that both in our student offices to figure out how many students could we put and have them identify desks that were opposite sides of the room if possible, so that if they chose not to wear their masks, that was up to the people that were in the room at the time. But otherwise, most of our students haven't been using their offices. So they've got them, but they're not using them. But our classroom space has been, and they went through and they actually put tape over chairs if it was a lecture hall.
Nice.
Which ones can be used and which ones can't.
I love that. I love that. And just the idea of pulling those chairs out that don't belong there, that just makes it so much easier. I don't know about you guys, but I find with first year students, there's still a little more of the high school mentality, and we all want to, we're going to push the teacher a little bit sometimes, and the not having the chairs there makes it so much easier. So Lauren says, we are teaching all sections remote, surprisingly. And I love this. I've had to encourage or teach grace. Love that. Has anybody else experienced that? I certainly have. Are there certain things that you have, ways that you have verbalized this to students, Lauren, to the grad students, like how to talk to undergrads about this?
That's great. That's a great question. I really have pushed all of our support programs through them, and talking about we need to be flexible. I think the thing for me initially was, we're going to get through this, firm in our goal, flexible in our plan. And to them, I have 17 brand new graduate students. They don't know what that means. They don't know. They got to stick with the policy. They know we all do it the same way. Kind of like saying we need to give them permission to say, I'm not going to respond to you. We need to give them permission to have a little give and take where it's appropriate. And I don't, mostly on a case-by-case basis, I have to say, whoa, slow down, right? I mean, you don't have to fail that student. The student didn't fail himself. So it's been interesting. I didn't expect or anticipate needing, I actually anticipated the opposite, where they would want to give too much grace and flexibility. So it's been surprising to me.
I think that's been the challenge, is trying to find where's that consistent midpoint. And that every student doesn't get a different situation.
Yes.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. And it's been surprising to me. I do have some students that are just like ready to write off the entire semester. Hello, we're the second semester into this now, so no, you can't do that. But a surprising number of students are so rigid, and I think it's their anxiety, right? I was really surprised. I had a conversation with somebody today, and she was going against the policy about, how points are awarded on something. And I said, no, you can't do that. You just can't do that. You can't decide that that this student didn't show up for an office hours appointment and you're going to dock them points on their grade. That doesn't work, And so that's the kind of stuff that I found that they are reacting to their own situation in ways that were unexpected to me. And so I really think that that's some of what you're seeing too.
And I think some of this goes back to the idea that we're checking in with our grad students a lot and having those lines of communication open so that they can say to us, like in a weekly meeting or our pedagogy class, they say to me, this is what's happening and this is what I'm thinking about doing. What do you think? And then it becomes a teachable moment for the rest of them, because then I say, what do the rest of you think? Let's talk through this and all the different issues. And then after we're done, I'll tell you what I think. And so it becomes an opportunity rather than a moment of panic, at least for me. If we can get them to come to us is really, really important. We have 2 minutes left. Are there any final comments that you guys want to make? Anything you want to throw out there that I've not asked you about yet?
I just always tell my students to remember to breathe. This is only school. I mean, and I know it sounds like they're very grade oriented and it's hard for me to understand because like they're really rule oriented and like, where's the rubric? And so I'm like, this shit's not on a rubric. So like, and I just like, when I was in grad school, Katrina came through and, I imagine, I don't know what's going on in the back world, but like, they just told us like, man, there's people's lives that's just been swooped out into the ocean. So like, be understanding and be patient. That was all the training. I mean, it's all my teacher training is like, here's a book or you can figure it out. So, I mean, there's been a lot of learning along the way, which has its pluses and minuses, but like, just have to remind students, it's like, it'll be all right. We'll make it through the tunnel. Remember to breathe. And I mean, I just simple things like that sometimes. And it's if you have a good relationship with your grad students, it seems authentic versus that like, I'm going to be robotic and this is what I'm expected to say. So I think that's important if you have a good relationship with your students.
Yeah, I think I think the other thing to keep in mind is that a grad student at this point is always going to be that student that probably did pretty well in their undergraduate. So their expectations are much higher of their students in some ways than maybe those of us who have been teaching more longer, right? And so that's another adjustment I see that grad students have to make is they have to begin to understand that their students aren't always out for the A, even though their expectation of themselves was that they always got an A. This is something that a grad student has to kind of grapple with at some point, and I think that adds to that feeling, Dave, that you just have to take a step back and breathe and take in the big picture.
And Tracy says, telling them to not to try too many new things or technologies. Definitely, because they're all shiny and they're all distracting. And
Yeah, there are so
I don't
many.
know about you guys, we upload things on GoReact, and so that's enough for us, I think. Like that, anything beyond that, that's crazy. Well, I want to thank everybody for being here today and sharing your thoughts and, in the chat and in person. I've written down a lot of stuff. I hope you guys have gotten something out of it. I didn't really know what to expect when I proposed the topic, and you guys have just shared so much, and I appreciate a lot. So I hope to see you guys at the next Basic Course Conference if and when it happens again, or at NCA or Central States one of these days. It's good to see you all. So I think I'm signing off. I'll see you guys.